Catholic Church through the structures of the Justice and Peace Commission that he led, formed, and provided an outlet for young people to be part of the Catholic political life. So that's taught me as a Catholic that we need to be part of the ecumenical faith in this country. And I want to endorse the pivotal role that he played as a leader in our country's democracy. Very few people know about his meeting with the ANC leader Oliver Tambo in London, and thereafter the delegation that he led, the Catholic Church delegation, the bishops that he led to meet with the ANC a few years later. Remember, he came under a lot of criticism from within the church as well. He came under a lot of criticism from other Christians, feeling that he'd overstepped his role as a faith-based leader. But his whole philosophy was that you could not be in the church and be blinded by what was happening around you.
Pope John XXIII appointed Hurley to serve on the 101-member Central Preparatory Commission of Vatican II. This took him to Rome in 1962.
Archbishop Denis Hurley was one of the delegates to Vatican II, but he wasn't a silent delegate. He never was. If he felt something had to be said, he said it. And in many ways, Archbishop Hurley lived long before his time. He was already looking to reach out and do things long before it had ever been thought of. Prior to 1965, a Catholic wouldn't even go into another church. Forget about a synagogue or a mosque, or even meet with other Christian faith communities, let alone other faiths. With the release of Nostra Aetate, one of the key aspects of that was the outreach to the Jewish community. Although it was the Jews and the Catholics that started first, very quickly after that, we saw the Lutherans, the Anglicans, the Methodists, the Presbyterians, and then in 1967, the various faith groups that were working together with Religions for Peace International, World Council of Churches, the Islamic Council, and that, they started working together. And of course, in 1970, in Kyoto, in Japan, World Conference on Religions for Peace was founded. And Nostra Aetate and Vatican II was one of the key areas that helped to put that path right for us. And Archbishop Hurley was one of the key people.
He was both a father or a parent and a child of the Second Vatican Council, because he was chosen to be one of 100 bishops who were on the preparatory committee, which prepared for over a year for the council. And so he had a good insight into what was going to happen. He already saw that there were two groupings. There was a very progressive grouping and a very conservative grouping. I mean, he sitting next to him in the Central Preparatory Committee was a French bishop who, after Hurley spoke, said, "What the Archbishop of Durban has just said is a heresy." So you can see that there was kind of daggers drawn there, actually. And Hurley was very much on the progressive side.
Before the Vatican Council, the Catholic Church was really was in a ghetto, really. It was a ghetto mentality. And I think the greatest experience, he admitted it himself, He said, the greatest experience in my episcopal life, if not in my whole life, has been the Second Vatican Council. It opened his mind. I had never associated with non-Catholic priests. But after the Vatican Council, we became great friends. We would get together, we would meet together, we'd socialize together. And all that didn't happen in my youth. I mean, I can remember the day when we weren't allowed to even enter into a non-Catholic church. And that changed very much.
I think there were a lot of people who didn't like his stance, even within the church. A lot of people say that, the churches played a role. In fact, if you actually analyze it, it was a small part of the church that played a role in the anti-apartheid struggle. The vast majority were happy enough for the status quo to exist.
He seemed fueled by the progressive promises of Vatican II during the late 1960s. And throughout the 70s, and even more so in the 80s, he became known for his prophetic and often also practical leadership.
See, judge, and act. And that was one of the things that Archbishop Hurley did in the 1970s, very early on, maybe 60s already. He sent off Father Albert Danker to go to France, to go and learn about this young Christian workers' methodology, and came back here and formed. And many of the guys who became very active in the anti-apartheid struggle, some of them ended up as ministers in the government, first apartheid government, post-apartheid government. They'd been through that whole process of see, judge, and act of the young Christian workers. He wrote a lot. He wrote a lot, especially in the field of moral theology. And he was quite controversial there because he was pushing some of the boundaries in quite a lot. I remember one of the arguments would certainly have been around the whole question of contraception. Artificial contraception would be one of the areas there. But also in the areas of what would be justified, what would not be justified in terms of the armed struggle. He was very strong on that there. I remember accompanying him to Zambia when a delegation from the Bishops' Conference went up to meet with the ANC leadership that was in exile. I think it was Archbishop Hurley, Bishop Biase, Father Mkachwa, and myself. I think were the four of us. And when we got there and got into dialogue with the ANC leadership, there were three questions that Archbishop Hurley put to them, which were really challenging questions. And one of them was, you talk about nationalizing the mines and the industries. Where are you going to get the people who are going to be able to run them? Now this is very practical from a churchman, and you think that all he's going to come there is talk about good and evil, but he's talking about what you can and cannot do.
Archbishop Hurley, welcome to you.
My initial thanks for this introduction have to be brief because time is severely limited, knowing what a good organizer of time Paddy Carney is. But dear Bishop Reuben, and dear all of you kind friends who have the goodness to come here and be with me today, gratitude from my heart. And thank you, Archbishop Wilfred, for your kind introduction and for trying to find something good to say about me.
I was teaching at Ananda Seminary, 1971 or 72, 1971. And I read about the commissions that were, the synod that was being held and the commissions that were being set up. And I thought, I'd rather like to be on one of those commissions. So I wrote a letter to his assistant, Father Langlois, and I said I would like to be one of the members of these commissions, and I am interested in ecumenism, and I'm interested in liturgy, and I'm interested in justice and peace. You tell me which one I must join. So back came a letter immediately, you must join justice and peace. And the next meeting is on such and such a day, and so that's how I got started. And then, I don't know how long I had been a member, but one evening when there was a meeting, Archbishop Hurley said to me at the beginning of the meeting, at the end of the meeting, I want you to stay back because I want to speak to you. So I thought, what have I done now? Anyhow, at the end of the meeting he said, I'm going to start a new organization and it's going to be called Diaconia, and I want you to be the director.
Not only committed to a faithful and daily meditation and to the recitation of the divine office, not only committed to the letter and spirit of the Roman Catholic Church, Hurley realized that a body beyond this boundary was needed, and thus was born Diaconia.
I'm one of the first staff persons, together with Paddy Carney, who started the office. Of course, there were a series of discussion with a number of different denominations where they had to actually say, let us start an organization that is going to look into the problems of the people, whilst we as churches are going to continue with the pastoral work. So when Diaconia was established, our task was to actually bring all the social problems of the people and then report back to the churches.
One of the earliest issues we dealt with was that the death of Joseph Mdluli, an activist from Lamontville who died in detention here in Durban. And we said, that was within like a few days of Diaconia opening its doors. Nobody is saying anything about the death of this detainee. Let us organize, we called it an evening of reflection on the death of Joseph Mdluli, and it was held here. And the cathedral was full. So it got us off to a good start, but it also put us on the map for the security police.
To the arrest of your 3 colleagues yesterday?
Well, we were terribly disappointed at the arrest of our 3 comrades, especially when we were given an assurance by the Minister Lachranfi that our representations will be discussed further after the court's judgment.
I came to the University of Natal to study medicine, and I do want to mention that when you arrived at the medical school, a lot of eyes were open to you. This was my first time of being conscientized and actually being able to be told of a situation that had been glaring in my life. As medical students, we were working together, and we were not only studying, but we were involved in community struggles for fighting for the fact that detainees should be released. And those were the struggles that I think led us to working closely with the Archbishop. You remember there's now a case, I think that's called the Hurley case, where he actually fought for a particular detainee until the guy was released.
Some of the other issues that we dealt with at that time were housing and forced removals were very much on the map. And of course St. Wendelin's, a big campaign there, because all the people there were going to be moved, and it was going to be made an area for Indians. And just the idea was just unbelievable. You can imagine the damage that would do to race relations in South Africa. And all these people, those houses would be demolished, and then completely new houses with electricity and water and so on would be put up for the Indian community. So we really opposed that, and stood with the St. Wendelin's community, and we had a major service out there with Hurley in the kind of lead role. And it made an impact, and St. Gwendolyn's is still there.
People had different ideas about how Christians should behave. So he certainly wasn't the kind of Christian leader that meant, you go to church and you worship. He felt that as a Christian leader, you had to take it outside of the church and make your contribution to society as a whole. And one of his greatest teachings was that around ecumenism and the ecumenical embracing of other religious groups. And I think when I spoke to other religious leaders, certainly from time to time when I did attend the dialogues and the discussions at Diaconia, the sense I got was that there was this great admiration and acceptance for this kind of ecumenical approach, which is something he started.
Built on the very grounds where an implicitly Catholic yet defiantly just Hurley served as a parish priest, stands today the Denis Hurley Centre.
Sitting in my office in 2010, Paddy Carney just arrived and said to me, I've got a project that needs to depict the life of the Archbishop. Would you like to be interested and be part of it? Because I know that you can help me in trying to push it forward. And then I actually said to myself, this is another chance, because this is a man you cannot easily forget. This is a man you worked with as a medical student or as a young person within your community. He was a father figure, and he showed how committed he was in fighting the system that was actually oppressing our communities.
The new building, with a new vision, still retains some of the elements of the old parish. The 106-year-old centre served as St. Augustine's primary school for its first 50 years. Then it was a space for meetings, workshops, conferences, night schools, when these were illegal, and giving refuge to people during the apartheid years. In more recent years, the Refugee Pastoral Office, as well as the Nkosi Nati feeding scheme, and the Usizo Loweto Primary Healthcare Clinic. The seeds laid down